Good evening, community. Hope everybody is well today, Monday, July 20th. As I was telling Cornell earlier today, I think we are in our fourth month, going on fifth month of quarantine, or what's supposed to be of quarantine, with no end in sight. So, thanks for joining us in another wonderful edition of the Coalition. It's Cornell and myself today. We might have a couple other of our coalition members join us. Cornell, how are you doing tonight?
I'm not gonna lie and say I'm doing great, but I'm here. I'm happy to be a part of another episode of the coalition. I'm happy to be a part of the revolution. So thanks for asking, Ed. How are you today, bud?
You know, it's a Monday, man. It's a Monday, and it's another Monday. And so for me, a lot of interesting things happen in the world. Um, you and I were talking earlier today about the need to heal and the need for us to create space to kind of process through all the stuff that's going on in the world. And my hearts, my minds and hearts are going. My mind and my heart is going out to educators today, um, because of all just the different things that they're trying to navigate through. Reopenings, not reopenings. Obviously, a lot of the social justice issues that our country is facing right now, and continues to face, and then their own health, primarily their safety as well. And so, and I also know that we've had some death in our community as well. And so, just thinking about how we hold space for folks, and you know, how do we care for each other during this time? And so, I'm interested in how you've been kind of self-preserving, and I'm interested in community also sharing with what they're doing to self-preserve these days.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, it's really important for teachers to take a moment and just kind of remember, what they're doing, and how serious it is, how impactful it is, and how it can be a life or death situation, how our work carries real gravity. And when things go well, they feel great, and when things don't, they can be devastating, right? And so I think that one thing about being a teacher is that we're very emotionally attached to our profession. We're very emotionally involved with our students. We're emotionally involved with our communities. And that's the reason why we chose to do what we do, because we're people persons. And so, as we look at what our new COVID world is going to look like, we're kind of having a hard time dealing with, what is teaching going to look like from a computer, or, just like we saw today, KCPS had to take a step back and rethink about what was actually safe and what was feasible and what was, best for all of our students and for all of our community members. Teachers have, a large stake at that. And I think oftentimes we neglect ourselves. We neglect our own feelings towards and the emotions that we have in some of these situations, man. So I mean, for me, it's tough to do things that are good for you because we're quarantined too, right? Like I know a lot of extroverts like to get out and have fun with people or spend some time with those that rejuvenate them. And I think the extrovert part of myself is kind of there. Um, I realize that part of my healing process and part of the way that I deal with grief and trauma is to reach out to other people and have other people around me. And not really being able to do that during a pandemic is difficult. Um, but I think more than that, we also have to find times for ourselves, and make that time constructive, right? Like reading or writing or something that's going to be some kind of emotional outlet. I keep a journal on me 24/7. So when there's something in my head or when something pops up that I want to get some thoughts out about, um, mulling it over in your own head sometimes isn't enough. Get it out, get it down on paper, and get to a point where you have something concrete that you can contribute to the conversation. Hashtag self care.
Hashtag self care. I think that I remember when we first started talking about like virtual space, and yeah, let's take it back to March of this year, and I know that we were hesitant, right? We were hesitant about
Yeah.
what this new reality would look like. We were hesitant to We didn't know how long it would last. I don't think any of us presumed that it would have lasted this long. I don't know. I think that I for sure thought we would have something under control or something, some different outcomes over the last couple of months. And so, and it looks like this is going to be the way for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember your hesitancy back then around like I don't like the Zoom space. I don't I don't like
Yeah.
the virtual space. Um, and now you're 4 months into it. So what are your thoughts right now around it?
Yeah. I remember that very clearly. And I mean, I still express those sentiments, right? Like I said, I'm not really excited about going back in the fall and teaching over a computer, right? Um, I think that my feelings have changed in the effectiveness of these spaces, right? I think that back then, a lot of my hesitancy was around like how effective can a virtual space really be in alleviating my loneliness, right? Or
Yeah,
like, how can I really feel like one of my biggest talents, I feel like, is reading people and reading the room and feeling people. And that's just not something that you are able to really do over the computer. So
yeah,
I think that it was really difficult for me to kind of figure out how I was going to be able to still feed my spirit and feed my people loving soul over the computer. But I do believe in these spaces. Like
yeah,
I think that seeing people's faces, hearing people's voices, listening to them support us, listening to them to support each other is, the best that we can do right now. And it's working really well. It's like it's all that we have. I think that we have a lot of room to grow in ways that it can be more efficient or maybe even more creative. But it's just in its infancy right now, right?
yeah,
Like, and we've kind of been forced into this space. It's kind of crazy how the information and technology revolution came from necessity, right, and not out of
yeah.
convenience, right? Like, soon we're gonna be looking at holograms, and you're gonna be standing in. It's gonna be Star Trek, right?
Absolutely, man. And I think about something you say. You as the leader of the block, Brothers Liberating Our Communities. One of my favorite moments this year was watching you and a panel of about 8 or 9 other Black gentlemen in the education space hold space and hold community. And I thought that was a really powerful conversation which you hosted. I'm wondering what you learned from that moment in terms of your own development as a leader and your own development of self care, because I felt the energy from an outside perspective, and it was awesome, right? It was a powerful moment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Um. So first of all, it was my birthday, right? And that was really cool, right? It was my 30th birthday, and I think
Did
a
we
lot of
celebrate
like,
your birthday on the coalition?
I don't know.
Happy
I'm not.
birthday first and
Thank
foremost.
you.
You're a grown
I
man now.
appreciate it.
Congratulations, you finally
I
made it.
know, right? 30. Someday I'll look back at this and be appalled.
Wait, I'll also be remiss to say that Katina Taylor's birthday just happened, I think, over the
Right. It was
weekend.
like
So
yesterday,
happy
right?
birthday to her,
Yeah.
our fellow coalition member. And anyways,
Absolutely.
tracking back.
Absolutely. And so like that to me, I think that like there was a little bit of tension there, right? It was like I didn't really like tell when we first were planning it, we threw out the date July 7th. And I was like, I thought to myself, like, oh, that's my birthday. But I'm not gonna say anything because that'd be weird. Like I don't want to make it about me.
Yeah.
And there's no way we're actually gonna end up doing it on the first date that we throw out. Like what event ever happens on the very first date you try? Just so happens that every single black male superintendent in the area was available on that date.
Just so happened.
Yeah, just was ended up being the perfect day. So we ran with it. And in hindsight, right, it was a lot of people were like, man, you're working on your birthday, and it's like, yeah, I guess you can call it work, but this is my life. This is my
Yeah.
passion. Like, what better way to ring in my 30th birthday than to be on stage with over 100 years of Black male educator experience, right? When I'm looking at trying to get an organization together that just is asking for a small percentage of that, right?
Yeah.
And so it was inspiring. It was jaw dropping at times. It was energetic. It was thoughtful. It was so helpful. I got so much good feedback from it. And the biggest thing is that it's so rare, right? Like, I think that was probably the problem there, was that
Yeah.
like we really enjoyed it. Everybody really had great feedback, but it was also this conversation of like, wow, I've never seen this before,
Yeah.
right? And I think like that is the narrative that we are like aiming to change, right? As wonderful as that was, and as awe inspiring as that was, how can we make that be more common? How can we make that be less jaw dropping, right? Because as we see, like, they exist. Yes, they are unicorns. There are black male educators, or superintendents that have been in the game for over 20 years,
Yeah.
right? The LeBrons of education, right? They're out there, you know. But we need to bring them together and elevate their voice and give them a platform to do that. So I
You know,
just felt extremely grateful for them to just say yes, right? And to be able to give them the opportunity to express themselves.
I think their ability to say yes and to be supportive also ties back into the self care, right? Because I think something that I think a lot about in terms of community. When you're a part of a community, when you feel like you belong to something bigger than yourself, when you feel like you belong to something that you're connected to because of your passion and whatnot, like sometimes it can be a healing space for us, particularly for educators of color. I know from my work and the work of the LEC that isolation in our community is a very real thing, and not knowing how to navigate these environments that are present is part of the reason why educators don't last long, right?
Right,
To be specifically, black and brown educators don't last as long as
right,
others because you know the environment isn't designed for their success.
right.
It's not designed with them in mind. And so I think about what I saw during that day, and for the ability to see. You're right. I think every superintendent, every black male superintendent in the community
Yeah.
was there. And what a powerful moment just to witness that history. Because, right now, I think it also seems like everything we do is historic in a way.
Hmm.
But we also don't take the time to realize that, like, that you're right, it doesn't happen all the time. And I think some of
Right.
us, um, probably experience that more than often than others, right? I think some of us are lucky to be in those environments, or some of us are lucky to live in those spaces where seeing a group of Latinx professionals is not like a rare thing in community. And so, just a
Hmm.
powerful moment, I think, that ultimately ties back to the self care of the community building and the coalition building that we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, I think it's self care to be able to come into those spaces. Like, for those black and brown, for those black male educators, I know that they spoke. It's powerful to be able to speak in a room like that. It's powerful
Yeah,
to be able to speak truth that way, and to be able to come on and really speak from their perspective, honestly, candidly, without feeling like somebody else in the room was going to stand up and challenge them, or even just knowing that people in the room have similar experiences, right? Like,
yeah.
that isolation piece is so powerful. When you can break down those walls, we start to see so much headway in terms of just creating a sustainable environment for people of color. That's all.
For those of us that are watching us, first and foremost, thank you for joining us again. Another edition of the Coalition. We absolutely love each and every one of you that spend your Monday evenings with us. Feel free to let us know in the comments how you're handling self care during this time. And what are you planning on doing? If you haven't done it yet, if you haven't taken the time to truly spend some time with yourself and take care of yourself, like, what are some thoughts on how you could accomplish that, and how can we be supportive of that? I know something I've been doing is taking a lot of road trips, very conveniently going to places that hopefully nobody else is, wearing my mask where appropriate, and then just getting away from Kansas City a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
and, just being in community with nature. I
Hmm.
think I have found that helpful. Um, but I don't know. Like, I don't, that's just the me thing as I'm learning. Like, some other folks don't want to be out in nature.
Yeah, I was out in Denver this past weekend, actually, and that was really nice.
Yeah,
Being able to drive up to the mountains, being able to spend some time out in the thin air, talk some crap to some Broncos fans. My mask is a Chiefs mask, so
nice.
everywhere I went, I was getting dirty looks, and like, servers didn't want to serve me, and it was definitely like a Denver versus Kansas City vibe all weekend. But it was fun though.
I think Kansas City won the most recent Super Bowl, so I think that we have that. It's part of the territory at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing they can say to us right now.
Right. At the moment. We'll see how that lasts. I'm also interested, man. You're a recent father. How
hmm
old's your son now?
hmm 16 months,
16 months.
15 months, yeah, something like that.
So
He's a little over one.
how are you navigating self care as a father?
hmm Um, he is my self care.
Mm,
I think about so many bad days that I have where it's like, man, I'm like rushing to go get Leon. It's like, man, like I need a hug from my little guy. That'll make my day so much better. So I mean that's a part of it. I think that a lot of parents know that when you are embarking on that parent mission, there isn't a lot of downtime available, right? He's a great sleeper, thank God. So like when he goes down for bed at like 6 or 7, I usually have at least an hour or two to just kind of relax. I love watching Bob's Burgers. Bob's Burgers is probably one of my favorite shows. Um, but like yeah, when I sit down and I tell people, I have my executive coach and I talk a lot about it's kind of my everyday. And when I sit down and really list out kind of the things that I'm doing on a daily basis between block and the work I do for Canbies and being a dad, it's just like, whew, there's like my before work time or it's mostly Leon, and then I drop him off and do mostly Canby stuff all day, and then pick up Leon, spend the evening with him, and then after he's in bed, I'm doing block stuff until I go to bed. So there's
you're
a lot.
navigating multiple priorities.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's an adjustment period too. Making the transition from the classroom into the nonprofit world is definitely something that I am kind of in the middle of a roller coaster on. And so that's a whole nother piece. So like a part of
Yeah.
self care is being able to schedule yourself appropriately, be able to manage your time appropriately. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is inefficiency. And so like if I have 4 things to do, I'm gonna drive to the furthest place out and then like hit my stops on the way back to my house. Like I'm that kind of person where like I don't even like driving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And so it's really satisfying for me to be organized and to accomplish tasks. And that's a part of the self-care for me, right? To be able to say, I got everything on my list accomplished today. I can actually sit back and relax at the end of it, and I'm not stressing about what emails I missed or what communication opportunities I dropped today. So
Yeah.
it's so important for to take an opportunity to self-care in terms of organization.
And Jorge, thanks for joining us today. Self care is difficult. Yeah, I don't think, I think also it's a matter of age and perspective as well. Because I think definitely in my younger days, I wouldn't say that I really knew what it is to relax. I remember spending like 12 to 15 hours working on my job and the other things that I wanted to do and everything else on top of that, and overcommitting, not learning how to say no, trying not to disappoint anybody along the way, which I think I failed at miserably a couple of times, uh,
hmm
not more than just a couple of times. And so I'm learning also how the power behind saying the word no,
Yeah.
and also censoring yourself to a certain extent when people ask you to do things, and like, is that something that you really want to do? Is that something that you really want to be involved with? Is that another committee that you want to be a part of, or whatever that looks like? And so often I think we feel like we have to stay engaged in
hmm
at these levels, and the reality is I don't think that's sustainable.
hmm
And what I've learned throughout my career at this point is like, the more balls we have in the air, um, the less likely you are to drop a couple of them, right? Or the more likely you are
Right.
to
Yeah.
drop a couple of them. Although I did see a meme the other day that said like, when like when you have all these balls up in the air, like there is a wisdom in knowing which of them are rubber and which of them are
Hmm.
glass. And
Hmm.
so it was an interesting perspective to be like, oh, okay, yeah, if I drop that and it bounces back up, like no big deal. But if I drop this
Right.
and it breaks, like that's how you can prioritize some of that. And so
That's a good
um,
one.
I really like that because it showed me a different way of thinking about things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are, like you said, that's really interesting. There are a lot of things that can bounce back and that can be repaired or that can be, um, gathered back up. But like maybe something like your reputation, or maybe like something like trust with your relationship, right? There are certain things that if you drop those, right, like there's not there's not that much that you can do about it. I love that. I also from my Kaufman days, they used to use an analogy about the hedgehog and the fox. I think maybe right where the fox is good at lots of things. Right, the fox can climb trees. The fox is pretty fast. The fox is cunning. The fox is can dig holes a little bit. There's lots of things the fox can do, but the hedgehog really only has one thing that it does. And the hedgehog actually digs really, really well.
Yeah,
And the fox does other things. He does a lot of things average. He does a lot of things semi well, but the hedgehog does one thing really well.
yeah.
And making sure that, and if not, one, maybe two things that you focus on, that you dedicate yourself to doing really well. And if you make sure that your mission and your values are aligned there, then you'll be able to decipher which ones bounce and which ones break a little better.
Just quickly want to bring in our other guest to the conversation. Edwin, thank you so much for joining us from Baltimore. I'm probably not saying that right because I've heard there's like Baltimore and Baltimore. So, correct me on the ones that I'm wrong. Thank you for hosting this important conversation on self care. Absolutely. And thank you for being a consistent supporter of our programs and our work. And Jorge, what I miss the most is the gym and the sauna.
Mm,
I've gained 30, 35 pounds, 40 pounds in the last, I think, 4 months. Part of it is I'm just not out and about. I'm not doing what I used to
mhm.
be doing. And two, like Coke Zero is my thing. Like I have, this. We talk about this. You always call me out on it, and it's an unhealthy habit. But of all the unhealthy habits that I could possibly have, like I feel like it's the one that's least damaging in the moment,
Mm,
and it also brings me a sense of security that I don't feel anywhere else. And so it reminds me back when I was like working at a local grocery store, and it was my first like full time job, and like I would get home around 2 o'clock in the morning. Um, and like the first thing I would go home to is like I would go and open a cold can of Coca Cola. So I've improved.
mm.
It's not Coke Zero, right? So it's no sugar, uh, even though that's probably the truth. But I think about like how even as we grow, we still repeat these patterns and we get into these
Mhm.
habits that like can't break. In terms of self care, and not all, I will say this, like not all self care is healthy, right? And
Right.
sometimes we tend to everything in moderation, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I was just thinking about my Coke Zero addiction and addiction to Coca Cola in
Right.
general.
Yeah. I definitely have gone through my phases of unhealthy unwinding or unhealthy self care. Um, I mean, I think that type of mentality started with my athletic career. Towards the end of it, you're a little bit older. You've been playing ball for 6, 7 years, 8 years, and you're 22, 23 years old. Your body's pretty banged up, and a lot of times, after games, a lot of that physical bruising and a lot of that beat down and that violence, you get rid of by having a few drinks. And that was kind of the way that we learned to cope with not only our bodily harm, but a lot of times we were losing too. So that was our emotional relapse as well. And then out of college, working as a teacher, I think it was the same thing. It was like a weekly kind of like wind up. And then once Thursday and Friday hits, it's like, oh shit, it's happy hour, right? And all of the week's tensions and the week's struggles just kind of pour out in a way that oftentimes end up being more destructive than anything else, especially for your body and physically. Um, and so I've done quite a bit of work over my professional career to think about what my release was and how I was monitoring my stress level.
Yeah,
If you let your stress level get too high, then your release is going to be too high,
yeah,
right? Um, I play a lot of golf, man. I play a lot of golf. I do a lot of yoga, um, and I really and watch what I eat really carefully. So I don't really eat a lot of. I don't eat breakfast very much. I know a lot of nutrition freaks out there are trying to strangle me, but I'm not a big breakfast guy. I like my body to reset from the previous night, like whatever I ate for dinner or stuff, whatever, it's still in my body the next morning. So I just chug water pretty much through like noon, and then I'll eat one big meal in the evening. I gained 50 pounds last year when I had my son, and I took all 50 off in this year. So I'm like back down to my pretty solid weight. Thank you. Um, Now I'll talk about a wardrobe, the struggle. That's a whole different issue, man.
no,
That's a real struggle.
that's one thing I appreciate about this time is that like shorts are a real thing, and so like if you got stretchy shorts, like you don't have to worry about updating your wardrobe, particularly if you have the ability to work from home, or you don't see anything below this part. So,
Don't remind us.
right. Quickly. Katina, thank you so much. Hey guys, sorry not with you guys today.
Hi,
Katina,
Katina.
we love you and we miss you. Happy birthday if you didn't hear us. Wish you a happy birthday earlier, and know that we're actually proud of you for taking some time this week to do some self-care and to take time and to be there. Edwin says self-care and healthy diets. How do you manage these two things while we are remote at home? I have no idea. Here's what not to do. Don't go out and buy snacks, and like don't go out to Costco, don't go out to the grocery store and buy yourself like Pop Tarts and all these like comfort foods. That's easily accessible right there in your home. Just gonna throw that out there. That's a learning lesson for me.
I
Uh,
think it's a half and half, right? I think going to buy things in bulk are great, but going
well,
to
yeah,
buy
of
things like
course.
Pop Tarts in bulk, maybe not so much,
I mean,
right?
have you had a strawberry Pop Tart recently? Like, it's so good. Have you
No, I
had
haven't.
pineapple upside down cake? It's so good. You
I
know,
remember. I remember.
it's funny, man, because I've been on that weight loss journey too, and so I remember like being very strict on my diet, like working out
Hmm.
meticulously is probably the right term for it, and I have just let that all go. And now that I'm talking to you about it, like I'm like, you know what, I need to recommit to that because ultimately, like you said something that is important, which is prioritizing this, right? Like
Hmm.
what of your habits in self care like are actually going to ruin some relationships, either with
Hmm.
yourself, with your family, with your loved ones, with your friends, with your community, and oftentimes like if you get into bad habits, it's obviously hard to break them,
Hmm.
and you can do some real harm.
Hmm. And it's a domino effect, right? Like you not taking care of yourself is also not thinking about who are the people out there that are depending on you, to that are looking up to you to be a certain example or a certain pillar of what it does look like to be
Yeah,
taking care of yourself and to be strong at this time. I know that you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I do want to just bring it to the space for those of you that are watching the Kaufman community. We did lose a very close friend of ours this past week, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge his presence and his loss live and recorded, um, and to give a moment for myself. Right, this is kind of what I'm dealing with today. And I think that when we first came on today talking about self care and talking about self healing, that was exactly where my heart and mind was. Um, and I think a lot about these kind of situations where as a black male educator, as a person that taught at that school, as a person that knew this young man very very closely, people are looking at me to figure out what it looks like. And for me to react in a way that was unhealthy, or to be or react in a negative way, would only be to destroy the people that are depending on me to be stronger than that, right? And I think that I've been kind of dealing with that over the weekend. Like losing a kid or losing anybody in your life can be tough, and you do want to react a lot of times negatively. I know a lot of teachers that are just struggling with not seeing their kids, are not struggling with being able to go to work and having a hard time finding emotional and physical outlets. And so I just like I said, I wanted to put space out there for Marquise Amos, and love for him and his family, and for those that knew him and those that loved him, and for those of us that are looking for support right now. To call someone, or to lean on someone, and to don't be alone during this time. This is a tough time.
I mean, that's one. I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you elevating his story and his name and his memory. It's it's incredibly sad, you know. How do you even navigate that? How do you even navigate a death of a student, particularly in times of COVID, where you can't give a hug to the family, where you can't necessarily maybe do the funeral services as quickly as you would like, or you can, like all these other things that come into these places. And then, to your point, like who's watching, what are you doing, how are you modeling, how are you navigating your own emotions, and then also displaying strength, whatever that may be. I know you and I talked a little bit about today around just crying in general. And sometimes crying is all you can do. And sometimes that's okay. And I don't know if we give ourselves space to have those conversations or not. And I don't know what that feels like, but yeah, sometimes it's okay just to feel, and
Yeah,
not like have an answer for everything.
right. I remember back when in March, when the COVID crisis really first hit, and there was a lot of emotion back then, because a lot of teachers were just truly concerned about their kids and about their families and about their communities. I think as we enter the fourth or fifth month of this, right, we are seeing, I mean, today specifically, right, the Supreme Court is trying to decide whether or not to extend the renters' help and the eviction notices. So things have gotten no better, right? Like we're still seeing a struggle and a worry about our families and our communities. And now we're mixing it up with school reopening plans, right? There's just so much uncertainty going on. And it's so important that, yeah, we take time to feel it, man, to really like sit with it, sit with the discomfort, and then figure out what's the plan of action. Like I think the discomfort oftentimes isn't that's not the end point, right? Like it's about finding your next steps, right? I remember back in March, my next steps were helping feed the community, right? And so like it became very clear to me that virtual curriculum wasn't going to cut it, and that my role in a nonprofit organization in food insecurity what was going to fulfill my passion and my need to help people at that time. And so I hope that other people can kind of abide by that same rule. Like yeah,
Yeah.
get uncomfortable, get upset, feel discontented with what's going on, and then figure out your next steps and do something about it.
I'm gonna bring Dr. Wade. What's up, Dr. Wade? Thanks for being here. Who gets to determine what a negative reaction is? It's okay to be pissed off and show it. We have to normalize that when and where appropriate. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to acknowledge your true emotions, and to be in that space where you're like the authenticity of having those emotions and feeling those emotions, and whatever your reaction is your reaction. Um, And so I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing. Who gets to determine what normal is? Obviously, we have some ideas around like what majority culture thinks is normal versus like what black and brown folks thinks is normal. And so you got to feel what you feel sometimes. You know what I'm saying? You got
Yeah,
to feel what you feel.
I'm a big proponent of thing. Again, like this dichotomy of thinking, right? That things are either one way or the other, or positive or negative. I and after this past weekend, God's really put me to the test about this saying. But I truly do believe that nothing that happens in life is good or bad. Things happen in life. They're neutral. They may have a certain effect on some people, and they may have a certain effect on others. But it's never all good or all bad. And it's about what balances and what breaks, right? It's about how when we all know this, right? It's about how you respond to things, whether or not to make something positive or negative. And it sounds ridiculous after like a tragedy, like losing a 15-year-old student, right? Like how can that be positive for anybody? But he's got a lot of friends. He was one of the most popular kids in the community, period. And I really hope that somebody is learning something. Somebody learned a lesson from his death, right? And I think that there's always a moment for us to stop and say, nope, there's something to be taken from this. There's something not necessarily positive or negative. There's just something there, and we have to analyze all different perspectives. And she's right, right? All the reactions are valid. Nobody's going to tell you that your reaction doesn't get anything done or isn't worth it. Your emotions are your emotions, and you're welcome to have them.
And I think important on the other side of that coin is that particularly the folks who are doing this work and are involved, social workers, teachers, who are also very emotionally attached to their students. I think it's also important to understand when to release that burden, because sometimes we tend to take on the emotions of those that are around us. So if Cornell, if you call me angry one day, I think my next couple of hours will probably be me being mad too. And so learning to disassociate yourself with others' emotions as well, is a part of self-care. So if you're feeling negative and you have that energy and I'm interacting with you and I pick that energy up, it's being aware and recognizing that and being like, you know what, that's not my space today. I'm gonna go ahead and put that to the side and keep it moving forward as well. And that's a skill set that takes a long, for me, I'm still practicing it on a daily basis. But it's definitely a skill worth practicing because we deal with a lot of people and everybody feels some type of way around some certain issue, right?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
um, it's
Yeah, it's about that awareness. You got to figure out how you feel in what situations and when to make your exit, man. You got to know when this is not your space.
um, Jorge asked a good question. How do you convince your employer at this time that it's necessary, or that this time it's necessary? Many preach about self care, but not fully support it.
Mm. I'm big on the collective piece, man. I'm big on like, you can call it a union, you can call it what you want, but if you write a letter and you get every single member of your staff to sign it, somebody's gonna listen to something. And I think that when you have strength in numbers, you have a voice that's a little bit harder to ignore. It's kind of also similar to you watch some of these guys, and I know we bring up sports for the second time. This must be only men on the panel. You watch these guys deal with their contracts, right? Like Chris Jones has got this really big contract, and there was, these guys that hold out or don't play, right? It's kind of like going on strike, right? The same concept. And you get enough people to say, this is what we want, and we're actually not going to move forward unless we get it. And then your administration, you can kind of force your administration's hand.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to do sometimes is to model the way. And I think sometimes you're going to have to go against ingrained systems and ingrained policies and whatnot, and say like, this is actually important to me, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to hold myself today and carry myself today. So if self-care is something that you absolutely need, obviously there's PTO out there that you can maybe you have access to PTO. I'll say this. Maybe you have access to PTO or sick days or something like that that you can utilize. On top of that, also advocating for yourself is another way, because sometimes I think we don't even know how to ask for what we need. And we're either afraid of being told no before we're asked, or before we ask, or we just don't have the right words or language, or it hasn't been modeled for us, and so we just
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's important for you to always have a self-awareness, and assess like what is it that you truly need, and get comfortable asking for what it is that you need.
Mhm. I
Because
remember.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I think that that's a great point. Like, I think that's one of the like the social capital pieces. I remember when I was in college when I first realized that if I wasn't going to get something done by a deadline, I could send an email requesting an extension. I literally remember like learning those three words and like what? Like if I'm late, I could just email my professor and tell them that I'm going to be late, right? And there's the idea that a person of color who doesn't come from this community or a quote unquote professional community may not know how to communicate in that way, right? Or, when I was to say, yo, I'm not gonna make this deadline, can I turn it in later? That would actually be denied as opposed to me writing a formal request using the cultural language that is accessible in that culture, right? And that blew me away. I think the same thing applies, like you said, in the workplace, right? You're being harassed or you're being I'm sorry, you're being neglected, right? Like, and a lot of times that stuff comes down to legal language. I've seen people, get into arguments with employers, and then as soon as you start dropping legal language, then your employer's position will significantly change, right? And that's another example of kind of like keep an eye on, what are some of the important words, what's some of the social capital that it takes to navigate the white structure that you're in, and what are the right words to get what you need.
And I think it's important that this is the power of community, right? Because just because you don't know doesn't mean that somebody else in your network or somebody else
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know. And I think actually, I'm a bring in Jamisha on this. Leaders need to normalize vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
part of being vulnerable is being willing to say, like, I actually don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, you know what, Cornell, I've been thinking a lot about this. I need this, this, and this. I don't know how to get that. Have you ever done that before? What steps have you taken to get that or access that? And I think that's something that we're trying to build in the coalition, which is access to
Mm-hmm.
resources, access to thoughts, access to like abilities to navigate in these spaces. Because I think a lot of us have been left out from these conversations. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
you know, I remember the first time I realized that you could ask for time off, or the first time you can
Mm-hmm.
realize that you can negotiate salary, or the first time I realized that
Mm-hmm.
you can negotiate like additional benefits, or even like not just say yes, I'm so grateful for the opportunity, but like I'm
Right.
actually worth this
Right.
opportunity. And actually,
Right.
you're underselling me as a person, or you're undervaluing
Right.
me as a person. Here's like what I'm bringing to the table that you're not going to get anywhere else. Um,
Yep.
that takes a lot of time to, at least for me, it did. I think other people have
Yep.
it down pat. Um, you know,
No, I'm still not there, right? And like as a person of color, I think oftentimes too that that didn't like fit in school, or that wasn't told that they were like a true academic, or that that they had a bright future because of their school performance. I still feel inadequate, right? And as like as a stereotype threat, if I am the only black male walking to this building and you offer me a job, yeah, my knee jerk response is like, damn, really? Like, oh wow, thank you. And that's such like a mindset that I have to get myself out of all the time, right? And that knowing that whatever organization you're working for actually is more grateful to have you than you are to have them, right? And you have to see yourself as a gift and a talent to an organization that's invaluable, right? And that's I think that's also a part of, right, like this job culture, right? People don't get hired to do something that they are good at. They get hired to do something that's like a job that they were taught to do, right? And I think that if more people saw the work that they were doing as something that was intrinsically valuable to them, then they would actually say, nope, this is my talent, this is my job. I feel passion and pride behind it. And you have to pay me more for it because nobody else can flip burgers like I flip burgers, right? I was put here to flip burgers, you know what I'm saying? And too often times, right, we just have people that are, yep, I just put this chair together. I know a lot of other people that could put this chair together, but they gave me the opportunity to put this chair together. Man, I feel really lucky to be putting this chair together, right? Like, no, that's not the
Yeah.
way it actually works, you know? I was listening to NPR this morning and they were talking about the rent crisis and all these people that are 3, 4, 5 months behind on their rent right now, and they're looking for further extensions because they've had nowhere to work, and now all the small landlords are also starting to appeal and saying, well, wait, we can't just let all these and let's be honest, like this is a socioeconomic battle, right? We can't just let all these poor people live for free. What about me, Mr. Middle Class, who's been working really hard to rent out these properties and to collect people's money, right? Because they're also not getting paid. Now their mortgages are being foreclosed, right? It's like a chain of reactions here that are having an effect down the line, you know, and it's important that we take a minute to step back to see, you know, what are what are the true impacts of what's going on, you know?
Jamisha says, I had a bunch of PTO and didn't take it. Being a perfectionist workaholic also makes it harder to do self care. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember the first time like that I took vacation, and I took a week, and I was terrified because it was like, who's going to get
Mm-hmm.
the work done? Who is going to, what's going to happen? Like, what am I going to not be able to control? Um, and I think one of my hardest learning lessons in my own career and professional career at that, was like, if people need to do something, they're going to get it done with or without you.
Yep. Yep.
So like, I think, I don't know how many, is it 40 million Americans today are without a job,
Yes.
or something like in that neighborhood. And so one, I think the hardest things to learn is no matter how good you deem yourself or how good your work ethic is, or, how good of a person you are, is like, sometimes you're treated as a commodity. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I think capitalism dictates that, you can be easily replaced,
Replaced.
or just gotten rid of. Like, if you don't
Yeah.
add value to the company's bottom line, like, you're out,
Yeah.
which
If you
is
got hit by a
a different
bus,
way
your
of
job
thinking.
will be posted tomorrow.
It would.
You know. So why? So
If
what
you
you
give your
killing
if you give
yourself
your two
about it for?
weeks, if you give your two
Right.
weeks, they might be like, appreciate that. Thank you so much. See you later.
Yep.
And so sometimes, that's also part of identity, right? When we find our identity, in external things like our titles and and the
Mm-hmm.
organizations that we work for, or like where, versus like finding that internal self worth, and being confident in who you are and understanding that your gifts are your gifts,
Mm-hmm.
and they can translate no matter what industry you're in.
Right. Right. And you get paid for your gifts, not for whatever industry or what your title is. Right. And maybe we'd be worth more than minimum wage at that point. You know.
I think we're all worth more than minimum wage. But
I
that's a
agree.
different conversation.
I agree. But
um,
I don't think a lot of people see themselves that way. Right.
yeah. Ari says, "Man, that has happened to me." I think
Absolutely.
I think that's one thing we all share. I mean, I don't know how many, and I think, I have seen some stories of people who like get it right from day one, right? Like they know how to negotiate, they know how to, assert their value, they know how to do these things, and I'm still learning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if I'll ever have it down. Like, I don't know if I'll ever truly be in a place where I'm like, I did that well today. I didn't compromise who I was. I got paid what I said I was going to get paid. Like, I got everything I wanted out of this negotiation, and like, my
Mm-hmm.
life is
Mm-hmm.
great because of everything that I
Mm-hmm.
did right. Versus like, ooh, I should have asked for that, or I had no idea. A lot of I think I tell you this all the time, Cordell, which is like, I had no idea you could ask for certain things.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know. I didn't know.
Right. And so,
Yep. I think
look,
that's been a big part of my journey over this last year is hanging out with people like you and Max Kaniger, Katie Booty, right? That are, these kind of like pillars in the entrepreneurial space, and Katina and Murray, people that have really given me a lot of question answering, right? Like I don't know, and I love asking and humbling, and I think there's there's a certain line there, I think, at times where people struggle with their egos, right? Like there's a question of, I want to ask for help or I want to ask for assistance, but I want to be seen as self-sufficient. I want to be seen as the boss, right? And I think people feel like when they do show that vulnerability, like our participant was saying earlier, that they're no longer seen as the leader, right? Because leadership, a quality of leadership isn't necessarily vulnerability, right? It's a go-getter attitude, or it's a perfectionism, or it's do it all, stand alone on my own.
And I tend to think differently. I think like one of the best qualities of leadership is vulnerability because I am more apt to follow those who show me their struggles and show me like their own challenges versus those who
Hmm.
have it all together. Um, this might be my bias in this conversation, which is like those who I see it have it all together. I just don't trust. I'm like something's up there.
Nobody does. They're
You can't
lying.
have it all together. And then those who are like, man, I made 36 mistakes today, and here's where I effed up all this, and this, and this. And I'm like, you know what? How can I help? How can I be part of that group right there? Because like,
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
Jamisha
Well,
goes,
because trust is really a word, or leadership is really about the trust, right? And you trust
yeah,
people that are going to be honest with you.
absolutely. Jamisha says, pay
Hey,
me what I'm worth, add tax. Pay me what I'm worth, add tax, and don't forget the tip. And don't forget the tip.
and don't forget the tip.
Also, I will say this: if you have your own business, remember that not just the tax, but the taxes you have to pay on the money that you're bringing in. So add the tax and add another tax on there, just because like it's
Hmm.
gonna hit you. Or he says, I find it funny when I just read the policy that states that they don't renegotiate contracts.
Hmm.
You know what I've also understood about policies? Policies aren't even handedly applied.
Nope.
And so just because something in the employee handbook says something, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to go up and ask like if it could be different.
Right. And I
So
guarantee you it's not equally applied across the board.
I have a feeling that it's not. Um, and so even I think that that's part of self advocacy to even know when like somebody's telling you no, to figure out if there is a different way around things, or to be like, oh well, how did that person do it? I
Hmm.
always love bringing
Hmm.
other examples of people into these conversations. To be like, oh, I saw this person in this company do it, and I'm here. So like, how to what makes them different than me?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And just pushing their thinking,
Right.
making people tell you what they don't want to a lot of times, right? Which is, that they either that they don't value you, honestly, right? Making them give you the honest truth, or that they don't think that you're worth that, right? And so that you can have all the information to be able to make the best decision about your career. Because I mean, honestly, that's what it came down to with me in my last career, right? Was at the end of it, it was like either you value me or you don't. And you've consistently shown me that you haven't by not having this conversation.
Yeah.
So it was as simple as that.
Something that Jorge says that I absolutely love is like, so when I limit your usage of my time, don't complain. I don't volunteer my time wastefully. Yo, if we can figure out boundaries as a community, if we can figure out how to like set our own boundaries and say like, you
Hmm.
know what, I'm only going to give you 15 minutes of my time because I know if I give you 30, 20 of it, you're going to not utilize, for
Yeah,
any
yeah.
benefit.
And
Uh,
I'm never gonna get it back. You're gonna waste my time, and then
right.
where's my time gonna go?
Like I'm out, and that's 4 minutes. I could have done something else or helped somebody who was willing to take the
Right.
advice or the feedback, right? Or at least call me out on the wrong advice or feedback that I gave.
Hmm.
And Teresa says, find another
Hmm.
job. We got to take some risk, especially now. My mama said all they can say is yay or nay. You
Hmm.
know, I do push this on when I talk to mentees and younger folks. I think a lot of us are scared of losing stability. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes we equate stability with a job or a company. Like I have a job at a good company, and so like I'm not worried about my salary from week to week. And I get that pushback as an entrepreneur. Like I can't do what you do because like I like my check too much. I'm like, and I appreciate that. And also, I have seen people, one week they're doing well in the company in the organization, and then 2 weeks later, management makes a decision and let them go. And so like, I feel no more risky to run a business than to be in a corporate environment, because ultimately, like, you know, your livelihood is in somebody's hands,
Yeah,
and so
you're at their will.
you're at their will. So
Yeah, I'm good on that. I don't tr- I don't trust them enough, Ed. I don't trust
but
none
you
of
know,
them. I think they all have my worst interests at heart, and so I'd rather pay myself than to have to deal with looking over my shoulder or being skeptical of every single decision that happens around me. You know.
not to say that entrepreneurship is greener on the other side, but you know, like sometimes it's the same lawn.
Yeah. Well, the grass is greener where you water it.
Look at you, just full of wisdom. Now that you hit 30, like all of a
Look.
sudden, like you know, it just hits differently, as they say. Um, or trust that is on the horizon right now. I have another focus, absolutely. Jamisha, yep, I love my job, but I also have my side hustle because it allows me to have some freedom. It's
hmm
empowering too.
hmm hmm
I think we should talk about celebrating side hustles next week.
hmm And I think there's this other piece too where I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I feel really blessed to be like what my job is actually working for my true center. As a director of partnerships for a nonprofit organization, it's my job to go out and talk and meet people. Like I leave work and go to a restaurant and we'll meet somebody and hand out a business card, right? And I feel totally blessed that my job and my passion or my hobbies are moving closer and closer together, right? That I don't feel like I clock out of work and then shift over to a different brain or think about something else or do something else. Um, and so like I really feel blessed to have my hobbies or my passions be the same thing that I'm getting paychecks for. And that is something I think that people of color also have to work towards, you know, to
Yeah.
be truly liberated from the system, is to not, again, right now get paid for something that anybody can accomplish, but to do something that you were put here for, that your talent is specific to.
You know, I will say to that is that not every hobby has to become a side hustle either. And so, if there are things that you just enjoy doing because you enjoy doing them, you don't
Right.
have to monetize it. You don't have to make it, you know, an additional income stream unless you want to, of course. But
Nothing
sometimes,
better with more money.
I don't know, man. You know, as they say, more money, more problems.
Look, I'll take them problems. Look, I can pay for
All right, speaking into existence, we'll talk back to you, man.
them.
So as we wrap up, thank you again to everybody who joined us for this edition of the coalition. We miss all of our other coalition partners, but they will be back next week, ready to go and ready to answer some questions as well. Cornell, I wish you the best of weeks.
Thank you. Shout out to Amos. Shout out to the family. Shout out to the Kaufman family. I love you guys. See y'all soon.
Have a good evening, everyone.